You're watching The Print, and I'm live with Gouridasan Nair, a political observer in Thiruvananthapuram in Kerala, and Manu Sundaram, the spokesperson of the DMK in Chennai. Gentlemen, welcome to The Print. Now, we're having this discussion on Kerala and Tamil Nadu. We've been watching very closely how the results are coming in. Kerala, of course, is scripting history. The LDF is coming back for the second time running. And Manu, your party, the DMK in Tamil Nadu, is also doing very well. But just to, first of all, say right as we start that these elections have been held under the long shadow of COVID. In fact, just not the long shadow, but a very, very immediate shadow of COVID. And India is breaking its own record on a daily basis, over 4 lakh cases over the last 24 hours and rising mortality, especially here in Delhi, where I am. Gauri, you're in Thiruvananthapuram. Manu, you're in Chennai. Welcome to The Print. And my first question to you, Manu, is about the DMK. Tell us how you are on the verge of perhaps scripting your own victory, your own comeback to power in Tamil Nadu. Tell us how it happened.
Well, it's very simple, actually. We won more votes than the other side. But the longer answer is that we've been working on this for the last 5 years. Of course, you're familiar with the 2019 Lok Sabha elections when in Tamil Nadu, there was a decisive mandate against the Bharatiya Janata Party and the ADMK. Of course, I will use the words BJP and ADMK interchangeably because by and large, I find the BJP controls the ADMK in the state of Tamil Nadu. Just to go back to 2019, the mandate was around 39-1. And that, I think, in a sense, tells you the sentiments of the Tamil voter against the BJP. And because by and large, that was an election where Mr. Modi sought a second term. Now, coming to 2021, much has changed in the world around us. And as you rightly pointed out, the COVID pandemic is in its second wave, which seems to be a more potent, more ominous surge in terms of fatality and in terms of spread. Therefore, I believe that this is by and large a mandate more than one against Mr. Modi in 2019, but more on the kind of misgovernance, misrule, and incompetence of the ADMK, and by and large assisted by the BJP in terms of handling the COVID-19 crisis. So therefore, it is not only just a pure ideological rejection of what the BJP and ADMK stand for, but also, I think, a verdict on the COVID handling other than, of course, there are other issues such as how industry has suffered, the rampant corruption allegations and so on. But by and large, I feel the greatest sort of factor in these elections, I believe, must be COVID-19. You will also, I think, take into account that 3 states, namely Assam, West Bengal, and Kerala, have returned incumbent governments. And I must make this point here, Jyoti, which is that in times of great uncertainty, despair, confusion, such as this, which is the second wave of the COVID-19 crisis, by and large, people tend to vote back the incumbents. This is seen and proven time and again, even in eras where there has been great security issues, where national interest has been compromised. The country and the voter usually returns the government in power. This is because people want to see continuity in terms of governance. So therefore, the Tamil Nadu election must also be seen in that context. I believe that there has been a rejection of the ADMK-led government, and I think this also played a major role.
Okay. We'll talk about a little bit more about that, Manu, but Gauri, your first comments on how Pinarayi Vijayan, the 75-year-old communist leader, has broken his own record of coming back with, right now, I think it's 93 seats. That's what we are reporting right now. But what are your figures? What are you hearing? And the reasons why the left front has broken this alternating pattern of power in Kerala?
Yes, we have broken the 4-decade-old record of no government having come back to power after 1977 in the post-emergency election.
Yeah.
Mr. Vijayan has been able to do this basically because the people has have endorsed his style of governance, his governance record. This is a responsible and responsive governance model that we saw in Kerala over the last 5 years. And we have had to face heavy odds. We had the huge floods in 2018. We had the COVID pandemic. It actually, the broke out
Still
in
in the middle
Kerala.
of the pandemic, yeah.
Yeah. It began in Kerala. So ever since we have been on alert. The government has been on an alert for the last 2.5, 3 years, and this government has been functioning under constant threat in terms of these two calamities, and also in terms of the various challenges it has been facing. But it has always kept steadfast to its course, and over the last ever since the COVID pandemic broke out in Kerala, it has taken great care of the people, because the kind of disruption that happened in Kerala is quite unimaginable, because lakhs of people were coming back from Gulf countries. People were trying to, just as migrants workers or guest workers were going back to their homes. So we had to keep them here and also take care of the people who were coming back to Kerala from the Gulf countries, and also ensure that, hearts remain warm in Kerala homes. So over the last 1.5 years, the Pinarayi Vijayan has done a wonderful job of supporting families. And I think the families in Kerala have paid him back handsomely. And he's been attacked by the opposition over various issues. But I think the people have decided that bread and butter, rather than those issues that they want to discuss, are more important. And also at the political level, I think the Pinarayi Vijayan government's battle has been not against the Congress, but against the BJP. And this was a two-pronged battle. And in this battle, I think that the CPIM and the Left Democratic Front has been successful in defeating both the agendas. And that's the significance of this election.
So that's interesting that you're talking about the BJP being the alternative, although I think the BJP is leading only in 2 or 3 seats right now. The trends are still coming in, but what I see is that the BJP is leading in Nemam, where Kumaram Rajshekharan, who was the former Mizoram governor, I think he's leading. Mr. Sridharan, is he still leading, Gauri, from
No, let me correct you. The BJP had 1 seat in the assembly, the outgoing assembly, but they will not have any representation in the assembly beginning, May 22nd, when the new assembly is to be completed.
That's interesting that the BJP is going to lose even the single seat that it has in the outgoing assembly. But Manu, can I come back to you and ask, from the trends that we have right now, the DMK has 146 seats and the ADMK coalition has 86 seats. Now, what is the reason for this? Is it a rejection of the BJP? Because it's not as if the BJP hasn't done well. It has done quite well. There are people who have voted for it. The Palaniswamy government has done reasonably well. If it was a rejection of the Palaniswamy government, I would have thought that they would have done much worse than this.
Well, I am a little lost for words here, because it is pretty simple that the halfway mark to form government is 117. So anything below that is and must be viewed as a rejection of the mandate. Just because someone got only 115, it does not mean that they have not done very well. See, that's the system we have chosen for ourselves. But it is the first past the post. It is the majority win. So therefore, this must be seen as an outright loss, an outright rejection of what Mr. Palaniswamy has stood for in the last 5 years. He had the complete support of the Bharatiya Janata Party. The Bharatiya Janata Party has the complete support of the Election Commission of India, the Central Bureau of Investigation, the Income Tax Department, the Enforcement Directorate, and large sections of the media as we see today. So I do not know what it means that Edappadi Palaniswamy has not done bad. In fact, he's done so poorly, in spite of having all these various agencies and the central government at his disposal, to not be able to conjure up. The fact is, as you would remember, Mr. Amit Shah, Mr. Narendra Modi have all come to West Bengal, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and repeatedly said that they will win decisive mandates. And today they have not. So therefore, these three states at least have rejected the Bharatiya Janata Party and its affiliates quite categorically. So that in itself should be sufficient for us to come to the conclusion that the BJP has been rejected. And isn't it Mr. Narendra Modi who recently said, what West Bengal thinks today, the rest of the country will tomorrow? For the sake of the country, let's hope that is true, because West Bengal has outrightly rejected Mr. Narendra Modi. But just because you have Mr. Nair here, and I would like to make a larger point about Tamil Nadu and Kerala, because that is the focus, I believe, of this discussion.
Yes,
now,
it is.
contrast the results, and like I said, the point I made earlier, the incumbency of Mr. Vijayan has been rewarded, but Mr. Palanisamy, the adjacent neighboring state, has been rejected. And compare, by and large, the political ideologies of the southern states of Kerala and Tamil Nadu have more in common than otherwise. So therefore, I would say that the progressive politics, the progressive policies of Kerala and Tamil Nadu, and this I do not have to make a very persuasive argument here, I hope, because the socio-economic indicators, the human development indicators of these two states make a case for themselves. Now, these states rejecting BJP must tell you something, and what that is, I will explain also. The BJP, by and large, every time they come to these states, only use one tool, one trick in their repository, which is that of categorizing the DMK, the CPM, and to some extent even the Trinamool as anti-Hindu. This is all they have to offer to the people of these states. They do not have to offer to people of Kerala and Tamil Nadu especially any developmental politics. This has been the failing of the BJP. Now, you ask me why the DMK has done well, and I will tell you not only why the DMK has done well, but also why the left has done well in Kerala. It's because these are parties.
I'm just going to ask, Manu, I'm going to ask you to hold your thoughts because I want to bring Gauri in here. Gauri, the question to you is, Manu makes a really good point about southern states, both neighboring states, Kerala and Tamil Nadu, voting in different governments, but voting in progressive politics, within quotes. I mean, those are his words. But the question to you is, firstly, do you agree with that analysis? And second, is there a message on these state elections, whether it's Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and I'd like you to focus on this, for the rest of the country as well?
Yes, I wish to add just one small point to what Manu was saying here. I think it has got to do with the diversity of this country. I think this diversity, in this diversity, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and West Bengal, we have refused to follow the narrative that the Bharatiya Janata Party wants to impose on this nation. We have resisted that. The left has done that in its own way. In Bengal, Trinamool has done it its own way. And obviously in Tamil Nadu, they have done it in their own way. The manner in which left has done it, left has stood, has been steadfast in its position, its opposition to the Hindutva politics of the BJP and the Sangh. And it has been, playing a very leading role at the national level. But because of the developments in Bengal, Tripura, and other places, it doesn't get to play that kind of role today. So the victory in Kerala is all the more significant for the left because, it's proving once again that the kind of progressive politics that the left tries to convey to the nation and the kind of responsible governance message that the left government in Kerala tries to convey to the rest of the nation has more validity than the esoteric arguments, the revivalist arguments of the BJP, which has nothing to do with the here and now, with the lives of the people, with the kind of pains of the people who are gasping for breath across India, particularly the place where you sit right now. So I think this vote for the Pinarayi Vijayan, the left in Kerala, and the anti-incumbency vote in Tamil Nadu has a very important message where, the AIDMK identified itself, whether Palanisamy gave a better government, relatively better government or not. The identification has cost him very, very dearly, I think. But in Kerala,
go ahead.
We have refused to identify ourselves with the development agenda of the center. We have refused to, allow the BJP to get away with that kind of arguments in Kerala.
And yet, Gauri, in the Lok Sabha election of 2019, we saw that the BJP++, the BJP coalition, got about 15% of the vote share, so that was quite significant. But Manu, the question to you is that, I was just speaking to Yashwant Deshmukh, who's the pollster from C Voter, and he said that the Indian voter is quite interesting. On one hand, you have this Muslim question and how people are seen to be pro-Muslim, or this whole appeasement, if you like, of the minority. But Indian voters don't like to be perceived as anti-Hindu. Do you think that Tamil Nadu is an exception to that?
I have no idea on what basis Mr. Deshmukh has made those comments. I am not a pollster. But I do know one thing. I do know that people really feel, according to me, that religion is something that exists in their personal spaces. Now, what has BJP's contribution to the states of Tamil Nadu and Kerala been in the last 2 years? The Sabrimala issue, stoking sort of passions there. And in Tamil Nadu, can you please name one thing that the BJP has done in the last 1 year? I can. They started in December 2020, in the sort of the height of the pandemic. They started something called the Vetrivel Yatra. This was a yatra led by the BJP leaders across the state of Tamil Nadu. Now, we asked them one simple question. When you take a yatra, you have to take it out against someone. Who are you taking it out against? This state has been ruled by the ADMK for 10 years now. Are you taking it out against them? No. This country has been ruled by the BJP for the last 6 to 7 years. Are you taking it out against them? No. This sort of, kind of politics which defies reason, logic, or, only relies on stoking communal passions, or even worse, stoking fears amongst a section of people. This is what has been rejected today, I would argue, by the states of Kerala and Tamil Nadu especially. And I would add to Mr. Nair's point, the point on diversity. This is a diverse country. The sooner the BJP understands that, the better. It is not a question of Mr. Modi or Mr. Shah learning our languages. They're more than welcome to learn our languages, but they must understand that every language must be treated on par. There is a case for multilinguistic equality, which has been completely ignored by the BJP. This one language, one religion, one cuisine, one pair of khaki trousers, as decided by Nagpur, may appeal to some parts of the country, I'm sure, but it does not appeal at all to where I am sitting in the city of Chennai, in the state of Tamil Nadu. So therefore, I think BJP would do well. I think Mr. Nair put it very politely as a message, but I think this is a lesson for the kind of politics that they've espoused not only in Kerala and Tamil Nadu, and taunting Miss Mamata Banerjee with Jai Shri Rams. I mean, what kind of a government do we have which does not even talk about development? Forget development. We are in the throes of a pandemic. What have they done to arrest the pandemic? What have they done in terms of vaccination? Where are these discussions? I mean, the most they have to contribute to West Bengal is who can say Jai Shri Ram and who is not saying Jai Shri Ram. Is this what the country needs as we were entering into a second wave of pandemic? I think the answer is what the final results of today's elections are, at least in these three states.
So what interests me about the southern states, and Gauri, the question to you is that, Mr. Modi, Prime Minister Modi, for example, has always used development as a very important plank of his politics. Gujarat has been amongst the most developed states in India. But what is interesting is that both Kerala and Tamil Nadu have always been very, very high on the socioeconomic indicators, whether it's education, literacy, health. I mean, education and literacy are the same thing, but literacy and health, for example. Now, what does this mean in a state like Kerala, Gauri, where you're already doing so well on these indicators? So when there's something like Sabrimala comes up, the right to enter a temple, and then the Supreme Court also got involved, the BJP garnered a huge vote share, right, in the 2019 election. So how do the people perceive it today, 2 years later? Is it seen to be something as emotional and as something that is attractive to them?
Now look at this election. If there is a third message to this election outcome, it is that these emotional issues don't matter to the people. when they are confronted with a life or death situation as we are faced today. In 2019, you hinted at that earlier also. In 2019, the BJP tried to whip up passion. And because they don't have the political infrastructure in Kerala to cash on it, the Congress was the beneficiary. They got 19 out of the 20 seats in Kerala. In this election, too, the same issues were, whipped up. They tried to rake it up. On the day of the elections, too, this was, sort to be made the talking point. But look at where the people have stood. They have decided that we are not going to fall into this trap. It doesn't mean that the battle is over, because the figures are yet to come in. Once the figures come in, we will know. And I think my gut feeling is that the BJP vote share would be a little more than it was in 2016. But I wouldn't say it will be closer to 2019 or anything like that, because we have seen very hard battles in at least 6-7 constituencies where the BJP was hoping to win or hoping to come second or things like that. So that will be there. But our battle is not over. In fact, the battle to keep the human development indicators up, the battle to have a new definition of development, our own definition of development, the battle to ensure that secularism, persists in Kerala across India. Those battles are still on. And one more point about the appeasement issue that you mentioned. The hardest battles in these elections were fought in the district of Malappuram, and the battles were between the left and the Muslim League, and not between the Congress and the CPM. In all those, several of those constituencies, the CPIM and particularly the CPIM was able to make huge inroads and defeat some of the major candidates of the Muslim League. Now, where is the appeasement? Of course, the larger question of secular positions, the left has its stand very clear. But at the same time, when it comes to taking on the Muslim League in Kerala's political space, the left has never compromised. Now, that's a very important thing. So it doesn't mean that appeasement is happening. And also, please remember, when it comes to the question of who is capitalizing on these emotional issues, the Congress, just as I mentioned, this identification between the AIDMK and the BJP in Kerala, the Congress has made the big mistake of at least partially or, indirectly, in a certain way, trying to identify with the agenda that was sought to be put forward by the BJP. And they paid a price.
Right. Manu, I have a question to you about the opposition space. Now, who occupies, you guys are back in power. Mr. Stalin is most likely going to be a chief minister. Who occupies the space of the opposition? Is it the ADMK? Is it the BJP, which is doing backseat driving? Who is it? And what happens to the Congress party?
Well, to be fair, Jyoti, Congress has done quite well. The latest numbers that I see on my screen show that they're leading in around 16 out of 23 seats. So they're very much part of the assembly. In comparison, they had 8 MLAs in the previous assembly. So Congress has doubled its numbers. So you should be pleased to note that. Whereas the BJP...
Perhaps I think it's the only state where it's done, at least in comparison to the seats. That
but please don't forget...
Everywhere else, the Congress is pretty much washed out.
Yeah, please don't forget, Congress actually has 9 members of parliament from Tamil Nadu as well. It's one of the states where it's probably the state where they've sent the highest or the second highest numbers of members
Kerala
of parliament.
has a lot of, Kerala has
so these are the states that they do traditionally do quite well. Again, just to go back to your question or your thinking about the Gujarat model, I mean, it's been 7 years. We've still not seen it anywhere in the country, perhaps with the exception of Gujarat. The models that we have subscribed to, and I say we, and I include the state of Kerala as well, as that of inclusive growth, fairer societies, and equal opportunities. And you know what that model is called? That's the Indian constitutional model. And it should come as no surprise to everyone here that the Indian Constitution specifically prescribes Article 14, Article 21, Article 25, where all these concepts are well entrenched. In fact, what we've seen from the BJP is how to destroy the federal structure, how to create secular disharmony, how to sort of, rake up these kind of troubles and disturbances amongst the people of the country. I hope that is not the Gujarat model, because I'm sure the people of Gujarat will not stand for that, their name being used and tarnished in such a way. So there is a larger agenda here. We want to make sure that these sort of Hindutva fascist forces of the BJP are kept at bay, and I think that's what we are trying to do. So your question about what will happen in the assembly, the way things stand, if these results hold, ADMK will have ADMK plus their coalition will have around 80 to 85. There should be one or two BJP MLAs in that, from what I can tell, though they've not been declared victorious yet. The good news, the great news is that the BJP vote share is still at 2%, which is, I think another great victory for the southern states. Though we've not been lucky enough, like my friends in Kerala, to have no BJP MLAs, we may have the unfortunate situation of dealing with one or two of them. But overall, keeping them below 2 to 2.5% is, I think, a good outcome, considering what I said, which is that the BJP is not just the BJP party, it is the Election Commission, it is the different central investigative agencies, it is the electoral bonds, it is sections of the media which are completely at the beck and call of the party, so on and so forth. So therefore, considering all of that, in a situation which is akin to an undeclared emergency that we are facing today, I think we've done quite well. And I think that's the sort of outcome that we take from today.
So a quick question to you, quick last question to you, Manu, before I move to Gauri for his last question. What happens to Shashikala? Is she absolutely over and out?
Well, you'll have to ask her there. I'm not the spokesperson for Shashikala, but her party has not won a single seat. Now there is a great confusion. She says that she's only resigned from politics, so not completely retired. So a resignation can easily be undone, and she still claims to be the general secretary of the ADMK. But I'm not the best person to answer that.
Okay, Gauri, my last question to you is about the Congress party. It's done quite badly. There are several very good Congress leaders. We talked about how the Congress has sent several MPs to the Lok Sabha, I think about 20 MPs. So why has it done so badly, and why is the Congress diminishing, on a yearly basis?
I think the Congress has a very confused leadership and a cadre which is in complete disarray. So it's only natural that they have ended up where they are today. So I think they will have to do a surgical operation within the organization, and probably send out a few people, not a few, many, and try to rediscover the organization just as they must do at the national level. Otherwise, I think, the hopes of this nation is in a certain way in danger. So in Kerala too, they fared badly as compared to 2016, which is not a good news for democracy, because we need a good, powerful opposition too. But opposition in Kerala is all about individuals and not about politics, not about Congress ideology or stuff like that. So I believe the younger generation in Kerala's Congress party would assert themselves and probably throw out some of those old people. I wouldn't want to mention names, but they have failed the party. Let's be very clear about that.
Well, Rahul Gandhi is from
Rahul Gandhi, yeah, he put a lot at stake in Kerala. That's very important. I think this is a slap on his face, honestly. And who's responsible for that? Is he himself responsible for it? Or is it his party that is responsible? That's something that they'll have to do a lot of introspection about.
And I last heard, Gauri, that Joske Mani was trailing in his constituency. And
Yes, he has been defeated.
He has
been defeated. That's one of those contradictions where there was this huge wave in favor of the LDF, but one party which took the risk of joining the LDF just before the elections and actually probably contributed a lot to the LDF's win in Central Kerala would not have its leader in the assembly. That's a big setback for the party.
That's Kerala for you, that the leader of the Kerala Christian community, Joske Mani himself, has been defeated. But then when he joined the LDF on the eve of the election, like you said, that sort of buttressed the LDF's credentials. But thank you so much for your time, Gouridasan Nair in Thiruvananthapuram and Manu Sundaram in Chennai. Thank you so much for joining the print to discuss the election in Kerala and Tamil Nadu. Thanks again.
Thank you.